Hello again. Back to do another thread response here. This one is to bigstar1000's Fine Wine thread. So the thread is to show some records that basically represent fine wine, in which you buy them or you get them and may listen to them or may not, but don't fully appreciate them at first, and then eventually you come back to them one day, and that's when you really appreciate it the most, is when you come back to it after a good amount of time. So the first choice I have here is the one that I'm playing. It's John Coltrane's Giant Steps. This was the first John Coltrane record I bought, and I've pretty much always been a jazz fan to some extent, but I wasn't really all that into jazz at the time. I just bought it because I knew I wanted some kind of Coltrane, and this one was supposed to be really good, so I definitely liked it at first. When I first heard it, I did think it was a really good album, but a couple years after I bought it, that's when I really started getting into jazz, and I returned to this album, and that's when I really understood just how great this album is. And now it's definitely one of my favorite jazz albums ever. Probably my second or third, probably third favorite Coltrane album right here. So this really hit me full on a year or two after I bought it. So that is the first choice. And the second choice is Wire's 154, their third album. And I bought this album just after hearing Pink Flag, and when I first heard it I was expecting more of something along those lines, something faster, something more punk. But it's slower, it's darker, it's more moody, and that's not exactly what I was looking for so much at the time. But I listened to more and more from them, and after coming back to this album I definitely appreciated it a lot more in its own right. It's more of an 80s album, more of a post-punk album rather than a punk album. I mean, I think those first three Wire albums really represent the transition from punk to post-punk really well. And now I think I like this one actually more than Pink Flag even. So just the dark moodiness to it is something that really grew on me. When I gave it a chance and recognized that this album really did that for me, that's when I really started to appreciate it in its own right. So Wire's 154 is my second choice. And then the third one here is one that I've just kind of recently gotten back into. This is from Compact Records. They've been one of my favorite record labels for a long time, and I bought this because it's one of their first releases actually from Compact Records. Back in the early 2000s, maybe 2001 this was released. This is Marcus Gutner's In Mo, by the way. And it's really more of an ambient album rather than a techno album. And I just returned to it recently when The Infinite Groove shared some of his music, and it actually really reminded me of this album. So I came back to it and just realized how nice the repetitiveness is, and the atmosphere on this album, and just the electronic, you know, soundscape that is created here is really nice, and it's just really, I guess it's kind of ambient techno because it does have some beats in it. It's just not quite dance music, you know, so it's more of a laid-back electronic ambient album, and it's really good. So this is one that I've appreciated more recently. And then the last one here, this was released last year I believe. It's F. Demon's Chicago, and I loved his first album. I believe it was self-titled, just F. Demon, from 2007 or so. And I first heard this, I thought it was a pretty good follow-up to his first album. but I didn't really love it at first. So I put it on my MP3 player, and while I was out and about is when it came on, and it really hit me hard. I just realized how funky this album is. Lots of these tracks are really long and don't have much variation in them. I mean, they're just really kind of more on the house side of things, more groovy and not as progressive as techno, I would say, but very funky. And once you get locked in one of these grooves, it'll keep you there for a long time. And when I heard it come on to my MP3 player just this one time, I think it was the song "Oh My God" that came on. I just loved that song, so I came back and listened to this album, and it just really struck a chord with me several months after I first heard it. Not quite as long as maybe a fine wine, but you know, I think that one really grew on me and became one of my favorites of the year. So Chicago from F Demon is my last choice there. And I'll be back with some more recent finds later today, so until then, see ya.